If you want your relationships to get worse, just do nothing. Do nothing, and they will gradually get worse over time. And yet, for anything, including relationships, to get better, it requires two things: attention and intention. And today, I'm excited to introduce you to Terry, who has over 40 years of experience. And today, he's going to share with us some of the things that he's learned and or discovered that's causing him to have a thriving, fulfilled, loving relationship with his spouse. So without further ado, meet my friend Terry. So Terry, thanks for joining us today. You have over 4 decades, 40 years of experience in marriage.
Yep.
And I'm excited for you to share from your perspective, how do we go about having a thriving marriage? And I'd like to start with the question, why is having a healthy, Christian, thriving marriage important to you, man?
Well, number one, I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. There was a lot of pain, emotionally, physically, and there's a lot of things I never experienced growing up that I wish I would have. A safe home, loving parents, and so growing up in that, not having that, having home be a place that I actually feared, I begin to want that from the time I was just small, just a boy, that I wanted this safe home. I wanted this close relationship. I wanted all the things that I never had, and yet I saw some of my friends had in their homes. And so I was able to see some of this at a distance, and I just longed for it from the time I was just a little boy.
Wow. And that's powerful. It's amazing how I'm reminded one of my coaches said that oftentimes in understanding our values, values come from past
Mhm.
perceived voids.
Yep.
And so share with us one of the things that you've discovered, because you posted on social media and it captured my attention. I reached out to you because you
Yeah.
shared about 12 things after a couple came to you, once again asking for some input prior to getting married. So talk to us about some of those things that you've discovered to be helpful. It's kind of a list of like some things to make sure to do and things not to do.
Yeah, yeah. So it was interesting. I've actually, over the years, I've had people come to me, um, several times to ask for advice and just, hey, what would you share with me? What have you learned? And actually, this was my nephew. I actually wrote this as a letter to my nephew because he was about ready to get married, and he reached out to me and he said, I don't have an example of a godly marriage or good marriage, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that you can share with me that I can take into my
Mm.
marriage that'll help me. And I said, absolutely. So I began to write down the things that I've realized sometimes the hard way.
Mhm.
And so, but things that I've learned and things I've put into practice and encouraged, other people. And then recently, I had another person reach out to me that has already been married, and he reached out to me and he said, "Man, do you have any advice for me for somebody that wants to stay in a marriage? That somebody wants to have a God honoring, really good, healthy marriage?" And he
Wow.
was he's, I think they were struggling at the time, and he really wanted this. And so I began to write this down, and I really began to look at it even more. And so I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just post this because maybe it can help other people. And so that's when I posted it. Yeah, just things I've just learned over the years.
So share with us one of them.
Yeah. So the first one that I really believe in, and my wife and I, now you realize I had no role model when I got married over 40 years ago. I had nobody to go to ask for this kind of advice. And again, it just came from a desire to have something I never had. And so when my wife and I were dating and we were talking about getting married, this is the first one that we talked about, and that is don't allow divorce to ever be an option or
Mm.
those words to ever come out of your mouth. If you live by that, you'll work through the challenges that you will face throughout your marriage. Not that you might face or could possibly come along, but you are going to face, every marriage is going to face some very, very difficult things in their life or in their marriage. And so when you go into it and you say, listen, our commitment is divorce is not an option. It's not something that we're ever going to talk about. Then you work through whatever it is that you're going through, whether that's you working through that on your own, or if you're getting help, from a counselor or a therapist or whatever. You're not going to go down that road. And so that was one of the very first things that we ever talked about, and one of the first commitments that we made to one another.
Mm. Man, that's solid. Now I'm reminded, Terry, that the Bible, that's our guidebook, if you will. That's where we go to as a resource. Over YouTube and podcasts and all the other things, the Bible is where we start, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And yet it does lay, and you have number one, a shepherd's, a pastor's heart. And
Mhm,
also the Bible does give some grounds for divorce.
mhm.
So what I believe what we're not saying is, like, if you're in an abusive
Right.
relationship, or if it's, something super toxic going on,
Yeah.
or marital unfaithfulness,
Yep.
we're not talking about stay in something that is
Yes.
clearly so toxic. We're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, I believe what you're talking about is just having a level of commitment, expecting challenges, and not hitting the escape, I'm out of here button
Right.
as an option.
Yeah.
Because a
Yeah.
committed person always finds a way, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
Mhm.
Outside of abuse, neglect, infidelity, things like that, because there are reasons, right? And that was the case in our home. A lot of abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. Neglect on my father's part. Listen, I am so grateful that my mom
Yeah.
finally got away from my dad. We actually felt safe when that happened. So absolutely, there are those reasons. But what I'm talking about, if none of that exists, and it's
Mhm.
just differences. If you're not dealing with issues as they come up,
Mhm.
every one of us have preferences that we have, and if we're not willing to compromise on our preferences, if we're not willing to meet our spouse in the middle, if we're not willing to work through issues that come up, and that will come up, when we allow them to fester, we don't deal with them. Jesus said that He gives us the ability or the opportunity, the reason to divorce because of the hardness of our hearts. And this is what happens when we don't deal with issues that come up, is our hearts get hardened. And what I have seen over the years is I have seen people that I believe still love each other, whose hearts have become so hard that they can't live together anymore. They
Mhm.
divorce, and you can see it years later that they actually do regret that. Now, I'm not saying that's in every case, but I'm saying I've seen that happen. And
Mhm.
so, you know, talk through the issues, deal with things that come up, make a commitment, that that's not going to be an issue or a topic or something that we'll even consider.
Yeah.
Outside of those other issues that you mentioned, man, make that commitment. And if you do, you will work through those issues. Now, here's what I want to say, Chris. You may not know how to work through those issues. That
Mhm.
was my case. What I realized is, although I wanted that, I did not know how to work through those issues because we never did that growing up. We stuffed things, we held on to things, we got busy doing other things. So we didn't focus on the pain. So I had to learn how to do that. But I learned how to do it because I wanted, to keep my marriage intact, and I wanted a good, healthy marriage.
So what's been helpful, as far as it sounds like there was some skill set and some tool set that you needed to, number one, become aware of, number two, implement into your marriage. How did you go about finding, gaining access? What are some of those
Yeah.
resources you leaned into to discover those?
Yeah, so we've read books, over the years, His Needs, Her Needs. We've read there I can't remember the book. I read it years ago on communication, and I remember one of the things that it says, I'll never forget this, is that communication in a relationship is like blood is to the body, right? So it has to be healthy, and you have to have it, right? And so just knowing some of these things, the 5 love languages, we've done assessments over the years, like the DISC assessment, and we've just really begin to learn about one another and learn what some of the challenges that I've gone through,
Mm.
that I've had to work through, from my growing up years, getting outside help, from some counselors at different points. And so, that's what's been really helpful for me.
That's solid. Number two, you have pray with your wife. So
Yeah.
talk to us about, like, that's an area that challenges me. I wish I wish I could say like, man, every night before bed, my wife and I for 23 years now have had the rhythm. And
Yeah,
yet it's one of those areas where, man, if I were being honest, like I experience some resistance and we do a lot of things together. And yet I feel it's challenging to
yeah,
actually lock hands with her and pray
yeah.
consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things. For years, I was a pastor, over 20 years. And of course, I prayed with a lot of people over that course of that time. But for whatever reason, it was a struggle. It was uncomfortable for me to pray with my wife. And I think part of that is there is a vulnerability when you pray with your spouse
Mm.
because number one, they know you better than anybody out there. Um, and so uh, they know you, and sometimes you might feel like, you know, I don't have, I'm not living the best life right now to be able to pray or whatever, right? But
Sure.
I know for me, it was uncomfortable. And
Hmm.
I don't know why, those are, I think, some of the reasons that it could have been. But I just remember I need to start doing this. We need to do this together. And so I just said, honey, I want us to start praying together. Now, she wanted this a long time before I ever came to her and said, I want to start doing that. And
Yeah.
so I just said, hey, I want to start praying. And so we did. And it was uncomfortable in the beginning. Um, but I was committed to doing that. And so we just started praying, and we started praying, for our kids. We started praying for friends of ours. We started praying just for all these different deeds and needs. And now, we have a prayer list that I keep on my phone and that we pray for, and we don't pray every morning, but we pray almost every morning.
Mm.
And so one of the things that we started doing is we didn't do this in the beginning, is we'd pray for things and we'd get real specific. We'd say, God, so and so needs to have a house by this date, or so and so needs something by this date. And it was very specific. And when we started doing that, we started seeing answers to these, like those things were actually happened. Now, the
Wow.
reason I bring that up is I think a lot of times we pray in general, hey, help
Hmm.
them, make them better. But when you begin to pray specifically and then you see it answered, instead of going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, what a coincidence, now you know, okay, God showed up, God intervened, God did something here. So now so from the prayer we started creating an answered prayer list. So now we have, like, okay, this one was answered and we know it was answered, which just helped, I think, deepen our faith, made our prayer time, um, just created a depth to it that we didn't have, even though we were praying. But seeing that, acknowledging that, filling us with gratitude, our confidence in His ability to hear us and meet us where we're at, all of those things. But yeah, it was not easy in the beginning.
Yeah. Man, that's good to know, man. Because sometimes it's like, and it's like other things where I always think it's easier for someone else than me. So, uh, thank you for sharing that, Terry. I needed
Yeah,
that today, man. And I
yeah.
love the specific part of it. Pray specifically, not in
Oh,
general, because then I can't say it was just coincidence and wonder. Like when I'm praying something specific and God does it, He gets the credit.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually meeting with a friend of mine that's a pastor, and he was working part time and he was pastoring full time. And we were talking about that, and he was getting tired and he didn't have the energy that he wanted to bring to the church. And so I just asked him, have you gone to the board and have you talked to them about just coming on full time so you don't have to do that? And he says, we've kind of kicked it around a little bit, but we haven't really seriously talked about it. And I said, well, what do you think you should do? And he said, I think I've got to go to them and seriously talk about it. So I said, okay, I'm going to pray for you. And I'm going to pray that within 45 days, you're going to
Wow.
have an answer. And so I did, because that's what my wife and I do. We say, we're going to pick a day.
Yeah.
And it's not like God has to do it, but it's like, again, we want to create context where we know
Yeah.
God did this. And he told me afterwards that really shook him up by actually saying God in 40, it shook him up. He didn't know how to take that. But sure enough, he went to his board, and within 45 days, they decided to bring him on full time. He was able to let go of his part time job and be able to
Wow.
give himself 100% to his church. And now we know, okay, so God heard that. God answered that.
That's
God moved
powerful.
on the hearts and made that happen.
Yeah. And I would imagine from him being in on that prayer, he was in on that prayer. Is that
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah. I prayed it with them.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, like, I would think there was acceleration, meaning he didn't need to go back and say, well, thank you for the opportunity to let me fast and pray about that. I
Right.
would imagine he was able to have a quick yes because he knew it was God at work.
Yeah. It was time. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
listen, you can talk all you want, but at some point we got to get going. Right.
That's
So
good,
within 45 days, we want the green light.
man.
Let's do it.
I love that. What's the third one, Terry?
Put your wife first. Just put her
Boy,
first.
that one requires some maturity.
Yeah. You just put her first. Always have her back.
Mhm.
You know, Jesus, and I wrote this, and I think this is really important. Jesus said in Ephesians that we're to love our wives as Christ loved the church. And there's some people that will use this scripture, wives, submit yourself under your husbands as under the Lord, as a way to control their wife and
Mm,
honestly abuse her emotionally and physically. And
mm.
because I've talked to people in these types of relationships, and they will use that, and that's what will happen. That's how they use it, and that's wrong. And but put her first. I say this should never happen. There should be mutual love, mutual submission, and mutual respect, and that's really what we want. So put your wife first. And I'll tell you what, this is not easy to do, because what we don't realize when we get married and for many years afterwards, we have a lot of firsts.
Mm.
For me, it was sports. It was Friday night football. It was Saturday football. It was just all of these different things that I just enjoyed, but I would never have said, oh, those are first, but they were. But over time and listening, to my wife, I realized that I wasn't putting her first. And so, put her first above everything outside
There's
of your relationship with the Lord.
there's a gentleman. Actually, I think I might have connected you to him a while back. His name's David Higginbottom.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably in a similar age group as you, and he's one of my go-tos when it comes to marriage and family dynamics. When I need to phone a friend, he's my go-to.
Yeah.
And it was about 2011, 12. My mother-in-law had a few drug-induced strokes, and she needed
Mm.
around the clock care essentially.
Yeah.
And my wife has a nursing background. She's very, my wife is obviously has a mother's heart, very nurturing and compassionate and caring. And so she started to have her mom over during the day. And I would come home from the real estate office, around 5 or 6 or whenever. And my mother in law would be there and she would stay until the evening until bedtime. And then my wife would take her over to her home, get her tucked in, get her ready for bed. And man, I was getting all bent out of shape about it.
Mm.
It was a big deal where, I had a moment where I went off, where I expressed my frustration about not being able to come home and have my own privacy. And, it's her fault that she's in this condition. And my buddy in Texas, he challenged me. He said, Chris, what if because it's important to your wife, it's important to you? Meaning, if taking care of her mom is important to your wife, what if that just became important to you because it's important to your wife?
Yeah.
And looking back, I'm so glad I embraced that, Terry,
Yeah.
because eventually my wife, she just reached her level of capacity with three little kids at the time. And eventually, she helped her mom get into a care center that provided great care and still oversaw everything for her mom. But fast forward, what I didn't see coming is that fast forward 9 years, you know, mother in law would pass away from COVID complications.
Mm.
So looking back, man, I'm so glad I leaned in to the discomfort of really not putting my priorities and preferences at the top of the list.
Yeah.
I'm real glad that I leaned into that one. And I still have areas that I'm a work in progress.
Sure.
Thankfully, as we know, it's not about perfection, it's about progress.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet, for me, when I hear that one, love my wife as myself or as Christ loved the church, I think about a sacrificial love
Mm-hmm.
of where it's putting her preference and her priorities over mine at times.
Right. Yeah.
And man, that challenges me. And yet that I think that is the opportunity. And for me, it requires spiritual growth and maturity.
Yep.
What's that verse? When I was a child, I thought like a
Oh,
child, reasoned
mhm,
like a child. But
mhm.
then I put away my,
Your
I guess this is
my
Chris's
childish
paraphrase.
ways. I put away
There
my
we go.
childish ways. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it reminds me of that, man.
Yeah, 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 and that's a great example of what you just shared. And I think listen, these are things I've learned over the
Yeah.
years. I've learned many of them the hard way. There's a lot of pain in
Mm,
between these lines, right? It's not been all great. It's been very
yeah.
challenging, but hanging in there, being committed, working through it is really the key. Like you said, it's not perfection; it's progress. And that's
Mm.
really what we're talking about here.
So this next one is equally as challenging, man, because these could stack up, meaning the small things
Yeah.
could feel like big things. So what
Yeah.
you say, I believe, is don't let the small things, what don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
How did you word that?
Yeah.
Don't make a
Don't
big
make a
deal out
big
of small
deal.
stuff.
Yeah. Don't make a big deal out of the small stuff, because this is what I did for years. I mean, just little things would just bug me, and the couple of the examples I use are probably things that people have experienced, is like when you go out to eat, and your wife says, yeah, I don't want that, or I'm not hungry. I don't think I'll order anything. I'll just have something to drink. And then when your food comes, she says, well, I'll just have a bite. And then she ends up, kind of wanting to eat almost the whole thing. And this, that used to bug me. Or maybe we had dinner and she didn't want dessert, but I did. And so I ordered dessert and she wants a bite, and these are the little things, that used to really, bug me. And these created arguments. This created, just an attitude on my part that is just, listen, food isn't a big deal. It's not a big deal. And yet I made it a big deal. And there's other things, the way that you do laundry, the way that you put on a roll of toilet paper, the way that you squeeze the toothpaste. I mean, the way that you load or unload the dishwasher, different things like that, the way that you fold clothes. There's little things that maybe you did them differently and than your spouse. And you feel like, well, that's not the right way because that's not the way that I did it. That's not how I was raised. That's not how my mom did it or my parents or whatever. And yet these little things, I'm telling you, and I know there's people listening to this, you're thinking of stuff right now. These are small things that really don't matter, but they create, big challenges in your marriage. And don't do that. Recognize the small things and just let her have your dessert, let her have your food, order some more. It's not a big deal.
That's so good. Mine could be like water on the counter or
Okay.
left open drawers can
Oh,
drive me wild.
yeah.
It got
Yep.
to a point for us, Terry, that um I needed a resource, and the book Love Dare. Let me back up. I started to, when I say I needed a resource, what I mean is I started getting hyper focused and nitpicking on all these stupid small things. And you know how it is. What I focus on expands, meaning I
Yep.
find more of it because that's what I'm
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to think about. I think it's in the book of James where it says, every good and perfect gift is from God.
Mm-hmm.
And if God is behind every good and perfect gift, so it's like find the good because potentially I could find God at work.
Mm-hmm.
So if God is behind the good, who's behind all of the other stuff? And
Right.
I started to focus on all the other stuff and I needed some resources because it was becoming a problem. It
Yeah.
was past just being annoying to my wife.
Yeah.
And the book Love Dare, I think they released a movie and then they came out with a book. But man, the book Love Dare gave a period of weeks where each day it gives you an assignment really to find the good in your spouse.
Yeah.
And man, that was really a game changer for me. But that's one of those, it's like a continual maintenance because it's easy to get nitpicky, man. And it's just not worth it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
no, I hear you. One of the things I'm a firm believer in is just being grateful, right? And just
Mm,
really being grateful. And one of the things we hear a lot about, hey, you should have a gratitude journal. You should write in it, just write what you're grateful for. But one of the things I talk about is, why are you grateful for it? What about that? What does that add to your life? What's the
mm,
depth? What's the height? What's the width? What's the breadth? And I feel for me that when I do that, I have a greater appreciation than just recognizing I'm grateful, for my wife. but what about my wife am I grateful for, man? And now I can start, listing those. I'm grateful, that number one, we love to have coffee together, and on the weekends she'll get up and she lets me sleep in a little bit. She gets up and she makes it. So when I get up, we have our coffee time together. And it's that little thing. And the thing I'm grateful for about that is because I love that time together, and just to be able to come out and spend that with her, it's just a great way for me to start my day. And especially with my health challenges the last couple of years, the way that she has shown up, the way that she has cared for me, the way she's encouraged me. I mean, what it's done for me. I actually told her this. I've told her that going through this, I have learned more about God's love from her interactions with me, the way that she's been there for me, than I have anywhere else, even more than just reading the Bible, because so much of, God's word, I think for me, is coming alive through the way that she has been there for me. And so, what are you grateful about? I know you're grateful for the sunrise. Like I love the sunrise in the summer, but why? Why? Because if I feel the warmth on my face, it brings an energy to me on the inside that goes out on the outside. I mean, just really going that level. So anyways.
That's beautiful. Wow. That's so good. The next one's serve your wife.
Yeah.
Talk to us about serving your wife. What does that mean, and how can we go about doing that?
Yeah. Well, we want to serve them, and we want to be there for them. And they're, my wife, it will do, I mean, anything, that I ask her to do. If I'm hungry and I'm sitting down and I want a sandwich, she'll get up, she'll make me a sandwich. And, that's just a small example. But I realized over the years, I wasn't necessarily that way with her. So I started thinking about this and how can I serve her? And one of the things that I could do is, if she ever asked me for something, my immediate answer was just going to be yes. Just, yeah, can you do this? Yes. Right. And I thought, I'm just going to say yes. I'm going to get up and do it, because in the past I've said, hey, I just sat down. I don't feel like getting up. Man, are you kidding me? I've been going all day. I'm tired, and I would actually say this. And, but then I just realized, no, that's not the way really, to serve her. And so just even little things. So for instance, when we go to bed, I usually head to the bedroom before her, and she, especially in the wintertime, she'll sleep with a heating pad. And so I turn her heating pad on so her bed is warm when she gets in it. It takes a long time for our water to heat up, right? And I know she'll wash her face. So I turn the water on so the water's hot when she comes in. And I just try to do just little things like that throughout the day that are ways that I can serve her, in addition to saying yes. Yeah, I'll do that.
And that's so good. Saying yes. I love that. Having basically a mindset of like, yes, and then I'll figure it out later. I'll do it. Yeah. That's good.
I don't know when I say, I thought to myself, just say yes and get up and do it.
Yeah.
Even though I say yes, it doesn't mean I feel like it. And in fact, a lot of the times I don't feel like it. Right. But I don't want to go based on my feelings. I want to go based on my commitment. I want to go based on serving. And so when I realized, if I just say yes, that puts me into action, whether I feel like it or not.
That's good. And I think you gave a good book recommendation earlier around this one. 5 Love Languages. Is that Gary Chapman?
Yeah, Gary Chapman. Yeah, 5 Love Languages.
And I think that's important, because I think the temptation for us guys is to, or really for anyone for that matter, to love people the way we want to be loved.
Right.
And yet we know from that book that there's at least 5 different love languages. And if mine is physical touch, and my assumption is that everybody's the same as me, when that's just simply not the case.
Right.
So figuring out how they feel appreciated, whether it's words of affirmation or gifts or the other ones I'm forgetting right now, figuring out how they feel loved and appreciated, and serving them according to how they desire to be treated, not just how I think they desire to be treated.
Yeah, that's so important. And I'll hit on that when in a couple more here on one of my points. But that's so important, because when we first got married, I didn't understand the love languages. And
Mm-hmm.
my wife, she just likes to be together. We don't have to be doing anything. Just hey, let's just sit on the couch. You read a book, I'll look at a magazine. So in my mind, I thought, well, we're not talking, we're not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do we really need to do this? Because there's other things I could go do. I could go, I could go in the garage and make something. I could go do something productive because I'm kind of a high D. So I like to get things done.
Sure.
But I didn't realize that her love language was quality time. And so while I resisted that and didn't really, it was like, to me, it was like, man, I don't know why we're doing this because we're not doing anything productive.
Mm-hmm.
But quality time is her love language. So sitting next to each other, doing nothing, not even talking, but just being together for her was a way for me to communicate that I loved her. And I didn't know that. So I'm so grateful for that book and that I've learned that. And now it's like, we do that. We do that kind of stuff a lot.
And that's good. That leads us right into the next one is find out what she appreciates. Those kind of
Yeah.
tie in together.
Yeah. And I think, this really speaks to being a really good listener and observing your wife when she's happy. What brings joy? What are the little things that just bring joy, to her? And when we first got married, if I traveled in for work or whatever, I would always bring her little things. I never really thought about it. I thought, yeah, I'll pick this up and bring that to her, and I'm gonna give her a little gift. And I think the thought, there was a good intention behind it, but it really didn't have anything to do with like her. It was just, hey, I'll just grab that, bring it home. And then I was on a trip one time and I was really thinking about her and I thought, what is it that she just loves that if I brought it home, she would think, me. And I realized that she loves to take a bath. I mean, like every night. And it's not like, 10 minutes. It's like an hour, hour and a half. And there's candles, right? And there's tea and there's books and magazines. And I thought about that and I thought, okay, so I brought home, I went and bought a teacup and a saucer. I brought home a candle. I brought home some bubble bath. And I gave that to her from this trip, and I'll tell you what, that was a whole different reception that I got from the other ones. It was like, okay, this meant something to her. And so find out what little things, that she likes. What does she like to read? What does she like to do when she's alone? When she has me time, what does she spend that time doing? And it's going to be different for anybody. But what this says is, me.
Mm.
You hear me, you see me. And I think that's what it speaks to.
Man, that's so good. Yep. It's funny how we can nitpick the little things and then yet also we could find little things. It's like the law of polarity. There's two sides of everything.
Yeah, right.
And so with the little things, instead of nitpicking, we could find the little things that communicate that we love, we care, that we value them, that they're special to us, and really potentially make their day. And yet it's all a bunch of small things.
It's just a bunch of small things. Yep, absolutely.
Compound effect.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's next on your list, Terry?
Okay, so this is the one I was referring to just a minute ago. Be a student of your wife.
Oh, that's good.
Just be a student because, what I talk about here is, we go through different phases in our lives. We go from, being engaged to we're newly married. And then we go from, being newly married to we have kids, right? And then our kids are toddlers and then they're teenagers and then they're out of the house. Then we're empty nesters. And there are seasons in our lives and our perspectives, things that are important, they change. And so to be a student of your spouse and just learn throughout the seasons of their life, what's really important. And this is, again, going back to learning that quality time was one of my wife's love languages. So learning that just being with her in close proximity, physical touch, holding her hand. So, man, we hold hands. We can be watching TV in our chairs. We have separate chairs. We sit right next to each other. We hold hands as we watch TV. Just little things that that she likes. Realizing that when as a young mother, when the kids are little, we had three kids too, to give her time, like, hey, honey, why don't you spend the day out? Let me take care of the kids. You just have time for yourself, giving, her breaks, just different things like that. But just really, be a student. What are the simple things that she loves? What are the things that make her happy? What are the things that give her a sense of relief and allow her to relax or bring joy into her life? And, you know, be a student and never quit learning.
Man, that's so good. So what's some of the things that you've discovered that helps? How can we practically go about being a student of our wife, you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and I mentioned it earlier, is just really listening,
Mm,
just really listening. So, for instance, when I first got married, we were newly married. My wife would say, it doesn't seem like we've gone out for a while. That sounds like a statement. I would say, yeah, I think you're right. We haven't. And then she would say it again, a few days or maybe a week later. Man, it just seems like we haven't gone out. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we haven't, you know. But what she was really saying is, I want to go out, right?
mm,
That's what she's saying. And
mhm,
so learning how she communicates, um, it seems like we haven't. It seems like we don't. I'm really missing this. So I think, just really beginning to listen to, listen to her when she begins to daydream or dream about the future. Listen to those things. I think another thing is, if you have access to her Amazon account, there's a kind of a wish list that they have,
mhm.
and so go onto her Amazon account and see the things that her wish list, the things that she really wants. I remember, again, my wife really loves tea, so I did this one time, and I noticed that she had this tea box in there. It was a tea chest where she can put all different types of teas in. And so I saw that in there, and so I bought it for her and I gave it to her. And it was like, that was on her wish list. So she didn't know I saw that, right? She didn't know I looked in there, but I gave it to her. And I think it was for Christmas. Could have been for her birthday. I can't remember. But I just remember it was like, oh my gosh, how did you know? And
Yeah,
so it just listening, just paying attention, you
yeah.
know, um, little things. I didn't write this in there in my notes, but you know, get the car door for your wife.
Mm,
Little things. Get the door for her, because I'll tell you this: they want that. They'll never ask for it. They'll never hint that they would like that. But I'm just telling you, they would like that. Again, that goes back to serve your wife, right?
it's
Do
good.
the little things. Get the door for her,
Hmm.
the car door. And just do those little things like that.
Some of the things that have been helpful for me to learn about my wife, and we've been together for, since high school. So, she's 40, going to be 41. I'm going to be 42 this year. We've been together for a while. And yet leaning into like the DISC assessment,
Hmm.
which is a personality assessment, if you're not familiar with that. And then what's the other one? Like Strength Finder.
Strength
And some of
finder.
those
Yep.
assessments that we use in the professional world, like, man, I've had my kids take those just because there was this time I remember we were driving down the highway and I turned to my wife and I said, "What are you thinking about?" And she looked at me and she said, "Nothing." And I'm like, how can you think about, I was just frustrated with it. Like, how can you just not think about anything? My mind is always thinking about things,
Yeah.
especially future things and stuff. I was just blown away with her answer of saying she's thinking about nothing.
Yeah.
And shortly after that, I had her take, it was either Strength Finder or DIS assessment. And what I learned about my wife is that she doesn't give off the cuff, like surface level answers.
Yeah.
She wants a question, she wants a legitimate question, a sincere question, and she wants time to think about it. And she will put some energy into taking the time to give a very thoughtful response.
Yeah.
Where me, that's different than me. You could ask me questions right now and we could just spit fire back and forth.
Right.
She's uniquely different. So one of the ways that's been helpful for me to learn about my wife, even after all these years, it to be on the journey of realizing that there's more to discover. I guess it's being learning based and open minded about my wife, meaning
Yeah.
that there's more to learn and more to discover. I don't
Yeah.
have her completely figured out, nor will I ever.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's goes back to just being a student, right?
Yeah,
Just
that's a good
keep
point.
keep keep learning. And I think what you did is excellent. We've done the disc assessment as well. We've
Hmm.
we've done the assessment with all of our kids, their spouses, and again, it's just a tool to be able to learn because we're imperfect people, right? We are. We're both imperfect people, and when two imperfect people come together, life gets messy,
Yeah.
right? And so, being committed to learning about one another, using tools and using resources, developing skills like listening, asking questions, observation, stuff like that are only going to help us. And those should be things that we will go to a work seminar and we'll learn listening skills, right? But we don't necessarily take those home and apply them in our relationships, but we should, right? We should apply those things and
Mhm.
use those skills in the relationships that matter the most. And so yeah, just being a student, learn what truly makes them happy.
Mhm. So, is there anything that you would like to say? Anything you'd like to elaborate on that one before we move to never accept I don't care or it doesn't matter?
um you know i I just think that those things are going to change, right? Those things are going to change, what they like. For instance, we're grandparents now, and so grandkids bring a whole new dimension into your life, a whole new dimension of happiness and fulfillment into your life. And so, you know, Chris, through my health journey that I've had the last couple of years, I've always felt that we've lived intentionally, but we're living even more intentionally now than we ever have. And I think if I could add anything to that is live intentionally with your spouse every single day, to love, to care, to serve, to give, and to make memories.
Mm,
Do those things intentionally every single day. Do something ordinary, tweak it just a bit, that would make it a lifetime memory.
wow. Do you have an example that comes to mind on that one, Terry?
Yeah, well, yeah, my wife and I have coffee on our deck every morning. I get up earlier than her because I like to see the sun come up. And we have these two chairs that we sit. I push them to the edge of our deck, and I think it gives a better view. That's arguably, but I remember that I set up our camera on my phone behind us on a tripod, and I took a picture of us staring out at the sunset,
Wow.
holding hands, because I wanted to mark that moment,
Yeah.
because that signifies something that's really important to us. So uh, it created a memory, it created a picture,
Mm,
but you can tell, very emotional. That moment carries a lot of emotion for me. And doing little things like that.
it's beautiful. The little bit of extra.
Yeah, just it may not mean anything to anybody else, but and
Hmm.
again, it was a picture of us looking out from our back. It was the back of us. It wasn't the front of us, looking out at this, because that's something special
Yeah,
that we do, together.
man, what
And
a beautiful
so
moment.
that's something that pops to my mind.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Terry.
Yeah,
I'm glad I asked. That's a beautiful example.
yeah.
Forgive quickly. Boy, that's a challenging one. That's a big one.
That is that's very challenging. Yeah, I think sometimes this is something that I think many of us probably could use some help with, not just from reading a book, but sometimes maybe even some counseling or some therapy or whatever, because sometimes the inability to forgive has some deep-seated roots in other things. And but to be able to forgive quickly really allows you to heal quickly.
Yeah. I think about letting go,
Yeah.
which I think there's times where, forgive, it's like, okay, I could forgive quickly and move on to that one. And yet the relationships that are, I guess, the deeper relationships that are more meaningful, sometimes to me, it feels a little bit more complicated than that, where it's
Yeah.
like, I just can't wave a wand and forgive. I have to go through a process of letting go,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is intentional. And so I appreciate the fact that you mentioned in to like lean in to seek some professional help. And
Mhm.
uh, I'd like to highlight like I believe in a Christian counselor, someone
Yeah.
that's going to take biblical principles
Yeah.
and foundational principles from the Bible,
Yeah.
where we're on the same bandwidth when it comes to our aim in life, and yet
Yeah.
leaning into a professional. I think that's a solid tip on that one, Terry.
Yeah, one of the things I learned about me, I'm a high I, high D
Hmm.
from the DISC profile, as you mentioned earlier. And one of the things about the high I is the greatest fear of a high I is rejection.
Right.
And one of the number one ways that people feel rejected is through the tone that people talk with. And so one of the things I've learned about me is, um, in my relationship with my wife is my wife's tone when she talks to me, although she may not mean anything about it, man, it just can hit me the wrong way. And then I can get, you know, upset like really quickly, it's rejection. I didn't know that in the beginning, but I learned all this, it's rejection. I take it personally. I'm hurt, I'm offended. And so I've had to learn how to, work through this and where this stems from. But one of the things that you'll also have to know and believe is that nobody knows me better than my wife, and nobody loves me more than her. And I know sometimes I have to, acknowledge this, like, okay, I know this, that she's not trying to hurt me. She's not trying to wrong me. She's not trying to do anything to make me upset. Sometimes I just have to go there and say, that's not what she's doing, because it might feel like that. And I know I do the same to her as well. We just do, like I said, two imperfect people, when you come together, life gets messy and can be painful. But yeah, and sometimes I'm like you. Sometimes I kind of have to work through. There's a process that I have to work through. Like,
Hmm.
okay, I know she didn't mean that. Or she didn't mean to hurt me. She doesn't, and I have to work through what I heard. Why? For me, I have to figure out, why did it hit me that way? Why did it hit me like that? And I have to work through that. So when I say forgive quickly, I'm not saying forgive in a matter of seconds.
Hmm.
I'm saying, work through the process and forgive
Good.
as quickly as you can. Don't hold grudges, because what'll happen is we will allow this pain, that this unforgiveness, to create a root of bitterness,
Mm.
where we hold grudges. And this is where the heart begins to get hardened. And this is, Jesus says the reason, people get divorced is because of the hardness of the heart. And outside of these other reasons that we mentioned, the infidelity, the abuse and neglect and all that kind of stuff, the hardness of the heart, this is where the hardness of the heart begins to take place. Man, and we don't want that, and so learning how to forgive. And I would just say to anybody out there, if you know that you have a challenge with this, if this is a struggle, then there's a psychologist that said, the first step to change is awareness. The second step is acceptance, right? So if you know this is you, if you're aware of this, then accept it and do the appropriate thing and get some help and figure out why, and get on a path where you can begin to forgive, whether it's your spouse or anybody else, because it damages you more than it does anybody else.
That's good. Terry, I'm the same on the disc profile, an ID. And you're right. My biggest fear is rejection. I want to be well received and generally liked by the majority, if
Yeah.
not everybody. And, and yet I've never connected the dots between the fear of rejection I have and the tone,
Hmm.
where somebody's tone, like that could almost be a trigger for me, where it's just like, it can become a big deal. So thanks for connecting
Yeah.
those dots for me on that one.
Yeah. It's absolutely a trigger. There's no
Mhm.
question. It is the number one way people will feel rejected.
I've never thought about that before.
Yeah.
The next one, be the right person.
Yeah. Yeah. This really, I got this from Zig Ziglar. You know, he wrote a book on marriage, and he said that it's possible to marry the right person and treat them like the wrong person, and they'll become the wrong person. And you can also marry the wrong person and treat them like the right person, and they'll become the right person. And he said, so the most important thing is for you to be the right person,
Oh
right?
man.
So he
Wow.
really he's not putting it on the other person. He's putting it on
Yeah.
you. So what, you be the right person, work on you, right? Really focus on how you can grow, how you can learn, how you can develop, and how you can become the right person for the person that you married, as opposed to kicking back and waiting for them to change and waiting for them to become the right person.
Wow. How do we work on becoming or being the right person, you think? Any tips on that one?
Yeah, I think if you go through this list, I think a lot of it's in here. I think number one,
Yeah.
listening, being a student of the, of your spouse, really listening, learning what matters, um, serving them, saying yes, right? Just saying yes. Hey, can you do this? Yes, and get up and you do it. So a lot of the things that we talked about in here is how we become the right person.
Mm.
Being learning based, learning about marriage, learning about communication, how to communicate, types of communication, working through challenges, seeking professional help, when you need that. Like you said, a Christian based counselor or therapist, is what I recommend as well. And so getting the tools, getting the resource, but knowing that it takes work to become the right person. You just don't evolve into that. It takes effort. It
Yeah.
takes work.
Yeah. Attention and intention,
Yep.
for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Keep date night sacred.
Yeah. Keep date night sacred. We have date night. Our date night's Friday night. And so, of course, now we're empty nesters. Our kids have all moved out. We have grandkids now. But what that means is, date night doesn't mean we have to go out. Doesn't mean we have to go to dinner or to a movie. We can do anything. And a lot of times for us, I like to cook. And so Friday nights, I will usually cook dinner for my wife. And our stove is on an island, and she'll sit across from me and she just watches. And so I'll pour her, a glass of wine, and I will cook for her, and we'll talk, and she'll be looking at something, and we'll just be talking. But what it means is, and then we'll probably watch a movie, we'll have a fire, sometimes we'll play a game, something like that. But what it means is, we don't babysit the grandkids. We don't answer our phones. We're not working. We're not doing anything like that. It's date night. And my kids will joke, well, every night for you guys is date night. And that's true. But there's one night that is sacred where we
Mm.
don't do any of these other things. That's what makes this night different. And so I would say to anybody listening, man, create a date night, make it sacred, make it about your relationship, make it about connecting, doing the things that you enjoy. I love to cook. And so to me, that's something that I really love to do on Friday nights, is cook dinner for us, and just sit and enjoy a nice meal in the house in front of our fireplace, and just hang out.
What would you say to the younger couple, Terry, that's right in the thick of it? They have two or three kids, they're dual career,
Yep.
just
Yep.
running and gunning. What advice
Yep.
would you say to them?
I would say it's even more important to make date night sacred. I would say, figure out a way to save some money to get a babysitter. You don't have to do anything. There are times that we will go down. We have a couple of hotels that we really enjoy to go sit in the lobby, and we'll just order something to drink and just sit there. Like in downtown Spokane, there's the Davenport. Here in Coeur d'Alene, there's the Coeur d'Alene Resort. And we just love to go down there and just sit together and talk and be in that, environment, have something to drink, maybe a little appetizer or something like that. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money or any money. There are times that we will go sit by the water. We'll just go sit by the water. We will go do a little hike around Tubbs Hill. Doesn't have to cost any money. So if you don't have a lot of money, and that's maybe a challenge for you, as it is for some, and affording a babysitter is tough, you can find the money. Don't go to coffee a few mornings of the week. Skimp on some things, but make date night sacred. Get a babysitter that you know, like, and trust. Spend that time together that's uninterrupted, that's just focusing on you, and make that investment. And don't skip it.
What I hear you saying is make it a priority.
Yeah, because you can always find excuses why you can't do it. You always can. You always can. But I'm just telling you, they're just excuses. You can also figure out a way to be able to do it. Doesn't have to be fancy. Doesn't have to cost a lot. You can do it. And I would say to those if you're younger, man, you're just in the thick of it, man. Make this a priority. Make a commitment. You're listening to this right now. Make a commitment right now. We're doing that. Pick a day and make that date night.
Terry, I can tell we hit a passion button with you on this one, man.
Come on.
Yeah. Okay, let's end with this question, Terry.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that every newly married couple needs to understand about marriage?
Yeah. It's not easy, but it's worth it. It's not easy. I mean, I'm telling you, it's not easy. I think for the most part, most of us are pretty selfish in one way or another, if not in all ways. And most of us have our preferences of the way that we want to live and the things that we want to do. And when you come together, remember, you're imperfect people. You both have a background, the way that you were raised, a lens. My wife and I have completely different backgrounds, the way that we were raised. She was raised in the same home, same parents her entire life, went to the same school, same kids that she went to school with all the way through from kindergarten all the way through high school. I was a complete opposite, complete opposite. So we bring those into our marriage, those backgrounds, those pains, those, all of those things, insecurities. And so, these are the things that we mentioned here. When you apply them, when you are committed, when you become a student, it doesn't make it easy, but it makes it worth it. The depth of love that you have, the commitment for better or worse. And most of us will experience the better or worst or richer or poorer or sickness and in health. You're going to experience that at some point in your life. And that's when those vows, really, did we really mean them? And, when you're getting married and you're standing in front of the officiant, the minister, and you say those vows, you have the best of intentions and all you can see is blue sky and green grass. But that's just not the way that it is. Man, there are challenges, and those vows, they're going to be challenged and extremely challenged at times. And I've referred to my health challenges in the last few years. It started with my wife's diagnosis with cancer before my diagnosis, and so we've been walking down this journey since 2021. I'm telling you, it has been a road, but that commitment of sickness and health has been tried and tested. And I'm telling you, I have the best friend. I have the best spouse. I have the most committed partner that I could have ever had. And I've seen it lived out under the worst of circumstances.
Wow.
And it's not easy, but man, it is worth it.
It's so good. Terry, you and your wife have a beautiful story. You guys are a beautiful couple. And thank you so much for being so generous to share this with us today. Really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And it's my pleasure. I love to do this. And if I can help anybody, then I'm happy.
Hey, where can people find you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, Terry Gurno. I'm on Facebook. I think Terry Gurno. I'm on Instagram. Um, excuse me. TerryGurno.com. That's my website.
Okay.
So
I'll
yeah,
make sure to share those links just to make it easy for people to track you down.
yeah,
And appreciate you so much, Terry. Thanks for
yeah,
sharing with us today,
yeah.
man.
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate you, Chris. Thank you.